Hey everyone, Kevin from MechanicalAdvantage.com. Today I thought we'd switch gears a little bit, and instead of focusing on milling toolpaths, we could take a look at what it takes to get started with Lathe inside of Fusion 360. To do this, we're going to use a tutorial file that Autodesk has supplied with Fusion. And to get to that tutorial file, I'm currently in a project. What I'm going to do is click on the Home button, and then I'm going to scroll all the way down until I find the samples directory. And inside of samples, there's a cam samples folder. I'm going to double click on that folder, and then I'm going to scroll down a little bit more until I find a file called 2x turning quick release. And I can either double click on that file or right click on it and choose open. And when I do that, Fusion's going to go ahead and open that file for me. When I get the file open, I can now close my data panel because I don't need to see the data panel anymore once I have the file open. So we open this up, we can see the part, we can see it set it inside of a chuck, and we are ready to go ahead and add some toolpaths. Now this part already has a setup and toolpaths added to it. We're not going to use these. You guys can minimize these, or I'm just going to right click on this setup and delete it altogether. And then now what you could also do is go up to the file and choose save as, give this a name and choose what project you want it to go to so it saves to your directory. I'm going to hit cancel, and you'll note that you can't hit the save button. This is currently in read-only status, so you can't change this file once you open it up. All right, once you have your file saved to your location, we're ready to go ahead and make a setup. So from the setup panel, I'm going to choose the setup command, and we're going to see our setup pop up. Now, if we look under the operation type, we're set to milling, and we're going to do a turning part here. So I'm going to hit the drop down and I'm going to choose turning or mill turn. And when I do, the axis is going to shift a little bit, but Fusion isn't quite sure where my center of rotation is going to be. So I'm just going to go ahead, and it's looking for a Z axis. I can click on any round face. I'll just go ahead and click on that face right there. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. And now you can see that my Z axis is lined up with the axis of my part. I also have to tell Fusion which model it is that I want to machine in this case. So where it says model nothing, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the model itself, and that gets me oriented that way. So now I can see that I have the stock on my part, and I'm going to make a few more adjustments to it, but for the most part we're making some progress here. I don't like the way this x-axis is facing. I want the x to face away from me, y to come up, and z to run down the center line of the part. So to fix the x-axis, I'm going to expand out my models, I'm going to expand out my design, and then I'm going to expand out my steering quick release, and I'm going to turn the origin on. Now what I can do is go click on the base of the X arrow and click on this plane, and I have my x-axis now perpendicular to that plane facing the way I want it to. So I can go turn my origin back off so I don't have to see that, and I can minimize this stuff one more time. I'm pretty happy with my outcome there. I'm going to go set my stock diameters now. I'm going to do a fixed size cylinder for this. My stock diameter is going to be 2.75. And the length for this is going to be 3.5 inches. So I'll type in 3.5. And when I look at this, Fusion puts some of that stock in front and some of it in the back. I really just want most of it to hang on to. So what I could do is change my model position to offset from front, and I'm going to do an offset amount of 100 thousandths of an inch, or 0.1, so we can come back and face that off. And now you can see I've got more material behind it to be held onto, and not as much to face off in the front. And I should be good to go on my setup, and I'm going to go ahead and choose OK. So I've got my setup created. We're ready to go and start adding some toolpaths, and we're going to start by facing this part off. I should also note that this tutorial is meant to help you get started using toolpaths inside of Fusion 360 when doing lathe parts. This isn't going to be a complete comprehensive deep dive into every option of every toolpath that I show in this. So I might dive into a few options here and there, but we're not going to cover every single option in every toolpath that we go through and look at. So like I said, we're going to face this part. So I'm going to go to the turning menu and hit the drop down and choose face. And I'm going to go select a tool. Now this file, this 2x turning file, does have tools associated with it, and we're going to use these tools to start out with. So I'm going to start out by grabbing tool number 1, the CCMT 80 degree rougher. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and then It may sound sort of funny, but every toolpath that I'm going to show you how to do inside of this, once I select the tool that I want to cut with, I'm just going to hit the OK button and see what I get. So in this case, I get a facing toolpath, and if I simulate this, maybe we'll slow this down a touch, what we'll see is Fusion just goes and faces that front off of the part. And it took a 100,007-inch cutoff there, and maybe that's too much. So maybe what we could do is edit this. We could go over to the Passes tab, and now I could turn on multiple passes, and I'm going to set my pass to be 50 thousandths or 0.05 per pass, and then hit OK. And let's see how that changed it. Now when I simulate it, again, we'll slow it down just a little bit. It's going to go through and take its first pass. It's going to come back, and it's going to do a second pass, and it cleans up to that green face. I've got my simulation set to comparison. So anything that's blue is remaining stock, and anything that's green is finished stock. And we'll go ahead and close that. So that's our facing toolpath. Now let's go and work on profiling the outside of this. We're going to do a roughing profile toolpath for that. So I'm going to go up to the turning menu and choose turning profile roughing. I'm going to go and select the tool. In this case, it's already going to use the one that I want. It's already pre-selected. And now I'm just going to choose OK and see what I get for toolpath. So we'll look at this from the top view here, and we can see that we have some toolpaths going across this part. And we can kind of evaluate the toolpaths, see what it is that we like and what we don't like. And I can see a few things that I don't like. I'd like this toolpath to cut farther past the back, so when I part this off, I don't have to go through as much material. I also don't like how it's diving down here. And maybe we'd want to change the amount of step down we do here, things like that, make it extend out farther. So let's go look at some of those different options. I'm going to edit this toolpath, and one of the first things I want to do is on the geometry, is I want to extend it where it goes and cuts. So from the front, I'm going to give it a 100,000ths of an inch tangential extension. And on the model back, I'm going to give it an offset here. So I'm going to say minus 0.25. Minus 0.25, and there you can see that preview is showing me where it's going to cut to, and I'll hit OK and see what I get. And now when we look at this toolpath, so it starts cutting out farther, and it's cutting farther past the back, still away from my jaws, but you can see how it's diving in both of these areas. So maybe we could go and look at how we could make it stop diving in like that. I'm going to edit this toolpath, and that's going to be controlled on the Passes tab, and it's going to be something called grooving. So right now it's allowed to groove radially. If you look at the tooltip here, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to hit the drop down and say don't allow grooving. And now when I hit OK, Fusion's just going to go and do straight toolpaths across. We're cutting past the back, getting pretty much what I want right here. So maybe one other change I might want to make is on the Passes tab. Maybe I want this to do a deeper step down per pass. So it's currently 50 thousandths of an inch. Let's make it 150 thousandths of an inch just so you can see the difference, and we'll hit OK. And now you can see that we have fewer roughing passes going across there. So you can control the step down of your tool that way. So I've got that taken care of. Now what I'd like to do is I would like to do a finishing toolpath across here, a finishing profile. So I could go to the turning menu and say turning profile finishing, but I've got a lot of the work done already. So I'm going to right click on this toolpath and say create a derived operation, turning, and now I'm going to choose that turning profile finishing. Go ahead and select that, and I can come in through here and change any options that I might want to change. Everything should be pretty identical with the exception that it's not going to do roughing passes anymore. So I'll hit OK, and what we're going to see is I get the toolpath that I want. However, we do see that we get a little warning here, and I've seen people work an awful long time to try to get rid of this warning symbol. And this isn't anything that you have to fix, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it and see what it says. And so it says a lead out has been modified due to a gouge with the remaining stock. So Fusion is just letting us know, hey, you had something set wrong, and it fixed it for you. I know what I need to change here. So if I were to edit this, I could go to my linking tab. I could change my lead out exit. I'm sorry, make it different. I don't want it to be the same as the lead in. And now when I hit OK, now you see that I get a straight up a 45 out, and I don't get the little soft warning symbol anymore for that. So now I've got that taken care of. What I'd like to do next is go through here and groove out between these two faces. I want to get rid of this material in there. So let's take a look at the toolpath that we could use to get rid of that particular area on our part. And that toolpath is going to be called groove. So I'm going to go to the turning drop down and choose turning groove. And I want to go select a tool. I'm going to go select tool number 9, the grooving tool. And like all the rest of the tools, I'm just going to hit OK. So once I get that tool selected, I'll hit OK and see what I get for an option, a result. And you can see that I get a tool path, but it's not exactly what I want. It's cutting way more material than what I want it to do. I only needed to go between these two faces right here. So let's look at how we can confine this tool path a little bit. I'm going to edit this. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to the geometry tab, and I'm going to turn on the rest machining option. Rest machining means machine the rest of the stock that's left over after the previous operations. So after the profile finishing operation, what's left? If I hit OK, now you'll see that Fusion does a much better job of limiting the toolpath, but it's still cutting a little bit more than I'd like it to cut. So we can further refine this toolpath by editing the groove. And on the geometry, I'm going to choose a different front and back. So for the front, I'm going to choose a selection. I'm going to select that face. And for the back, I'm going to choose another selection, and I'm going to choose that face right there. So now we're going to limit between those two. And when I hit OK, you'll see that the toolpath now does a much better job of staying between those faces. So let's look at a couple other little things that we can change with the grooving toolpath. So I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to go to the passes tab. And what I want to do is, instead of doing a full step down, I'm going to choose a partial step down. And so I'm going to set my step over amount here to be 100 thousandths of an inch or 0.1. And I'm going to set my maximum grooving step down to be 0.3 or 300 thousandths. And now I can hit OK. And what we should see is fewer tool paths, and it doesn't step down quite as far. So let's see what that looks like in the simulation. I'll simulate that starting with the grooving tool path, and let's slow this down just a little bit. And so it's going to come down here. It's going to do that 300,000 step down and go across and clean this up. This toolpath is going to do a clearing toolpath before it gets done finishing, before it cleans itself up. Now, one other change I might want to make is on the passes, I'm leaving 40 thousandths of an inch to clean up on the walls. I'm gonna change that to a much smaller amount. So I'm gonna say 0.005 to clean up. So I'll go ahead and say 0.005. That gives me less material to clean up. Now, let me simulate this one more time without the stock on. And I'll slow this down a little bit, and I want to jump forward just a little bit more. So some of the collisions that we're going to see, let me slow that down one more time. Some of the collisions that we're going to see on this aren't really going to be there. So I'm going to jump back here and hit play. Now what you're going to see is we're doing the final cleanup pass here, I think. In a second, it's going to come over here. It's doing the clearing pass. It's pushing down and coming across. And now it's going to come and get ready to do the cleanup pass on here, the finishing pass. Now notice it pushes the tool down, it slides across, and it's going to pull the insert back up the wall, which often isn't desirable. So let's look at how we can maybe fix that. If I were to edit this tool path, I'm going to go to the passes tab, and now this tool is allowed to go up and down. I'm going to change the option so it goes only down. So we make that change. Let's simulate that one more time. Try to jump a little bit farther ahead. Slow it down one more time and hit play. Again, we're going to see that clearing pass first. And then we're going to see the finishing tool path come up. So now this time what will happen is the tool is going to be pushed down. It's going to go roughly halfway across. So it's pushing the tool down. It's going to go into its finishing tool path. And then it's going to go to the other side and repeat the process. But instead of pulling the insert up, it's going to push the tool down and then meet where it left off. So there it's pushing the tool down the wall. It's going to slide across. This is the finishing tool path. Go across that little fillet, meet where the last tool path was, and now we're done with the finishing tool path on the groove. So we've got the outside groove taken care of. And now we just have to worry about taking care of the inside bore and parting this part off. So let's go look at how we can do that. Before I do my inside profiling, I want to drill that hole out first. So on the drilling panel, we're going to grab the drill And if I go to the geometry tab, I can hover my mouse over that diameter and see that diameter is roughly an inch. And so now I can go back to my tool tab and let's go select a tool. Again, in this file is a drill. It's a 61/64 drill, so almost an inch. So that'll work. So we'll select that guy. And then for the geometry, I'm going to click on that whole face. Now, right now, what it would do is it would wrap it through the front of the part and start drilling the hole right there. So we want to make a couple changes to it. I'm going to turn on auto merge hole segments, which is going to recognize that that other part of the bore is also part of the hole. So that works out. And then I'm going to go to the heights tab and say that I want to drill the tip through the bottom, which is going to bring the shoulder down. And I want to go plenty past the bottom of this part. So I'm going to say 0.3, 300 thousandths past to get drilled through there, so that when I come back, I don't have to worry about my tool bottoming out or anything when I do my inside profiling. And then on the cycle tab, I think I'll choose to do chip breaking partial retract, and I'll do an accumulated pecking depth of 0.75 inches. So once the tool gets in 3/4 of an inch, it'll pull all the way back out to get rid of the chips and go back in and start pecking one more time. I'll hit OK. And now we have the drilling toolpath that removes the majority of the material out of this bore. So what I want to do first is rough out the material that's left right there. And to do that, I'm going to choose turning and choose turning profile roughing. And I'm going to go grab a tool out of this part, and we're going to see that there is an ID boring tool. Tool number 6 is what we're going to run with. Now when I choose tool number 6, it's set up to default me to be inside profiling. When you're working on the inside of a part like this, you need to make sure your turning mode is inside profiling instead of outside profiling. On the geometry, I'm going to choose to cut from model front, and I'm going to cut to a selection. I want to go down to this depth right there. I'm also going to do 100 thousandths of an inch tangential extension on the front of this again as well. So we're going to add that value in there. And then now we're going to go look at the radii. This is sort of the first time where this matters a lot, what we're doing. And this is where the tool is going to lead in, is on the clearance. It's going to start cutting from the inner radius, and it's going to cut out to the outer radius. So I'm going to change this to be a selection, and I'm going to choose on that face right there. And I'm just going to give it a value of, say, -0.1. That should be enough for what we want to do. I want to start cutting from this selection right here, and I want to cut out to this selection right there. So those are my 3 things that I want to click on. And I'm going to choose OK, and now I should get a toolpath that goes and roughs out that material on that part. I want to make sure I left a little material on the wall, so I'm going to go to the passes, and it left a little bit of material to come back and clean up. So I'm good on my roughing toolpath for this. What I want to do is one more toolpath. So I'm going to say turning profile finishing. It's going to be the same tool for my geometry. This time I'm going to go to model front to model back. On my front, I'm going to do my 100 thousandths of an inch tangential extension. Sorry, I'm going to change that to be 100 thousandths of an inch there. Now on my radii, I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to say from a selection, I'm going to click on that face. I'm going to do an offset of -0.1, 100 thousandths of an inch. I want to cut the same way from this selection right here. And this time, because I want that to be included, I'm going to say -0.05. And then I'm going to cut out to this selection right there. So those are my 3 values that I'm going to choose. And we'll hit OK. And there we get a profiling toolpath that goes and cleans up the material that was left that the drill didn't do and came across. To make one small change to this, I'm going to edit this, and on the passes tab, I'm going to change the direction to be, instead of front to back, I'm going to say back to front, and then hit OK. And now if I were to simulate just this toolpath without the stock on, what'll happen is the tool is going to go inside of the bore, it's going to drag across from back to front and clean up the inside of this. So I've got that bore taken care of now. So the majority of the work on this part is done. I only have one last thing to do, and that's going to be to part this part off. So from the turning menu, I'm going to choose turning part. Fusion is going to grab a grooving toolpath if you've used one. I think there's a better parting tool in here, so we're gonna go grab tool number 5 for this. I'm gonna go ahead and select that and then just hit OK. And what we'll see is Fusion goes and parts this part off, but it's cutting way more material than it needs to. It's starting outside of the stock and is finishing at the center line, and we don't need it to go that far. So I'm gonna go edit this, and on my geometry, everything is okay there. But on the radii, we can say the outer radius is going to be the model OD, and then the inner radius is going to be the model ID. Maybe we can give it a little bit of an offset, so minus 0.05 or minus 0.02 should be enough. We'll just go ahead and do that and hit OK. And now we're not cutting nearly as far when we come down with this part. So it's not going towards the center line nearly as much. So if I come back to my setup, I'm going to go ahead and simulate this. I'm going to turn my stock on. I have tail set as my option, so we're going to face this part off. Now we do our roughing profiling. It comes and does a finish profile. It grooves out the area between those two flanges. It does our drill. It roughs our bore. It cleans it up and it parts it off. And there we have a finished part that's ready to post out. So hopefully you guys like this one. I know it's a little different. I usually focus on milling things, but I thought I would do a little tutorial on how to get started with lathe. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.